Welcome to Realcast, the weekly roundup of the real asset markets. My name's Richard Betts, and I'm joined this week by Paul Strome and Nicole Dines. Nicole, what's your kind of take on the stories this week?
I looked at the Tory party conference in Manchester this week, and in particular at Boris Johnson's speech. And there were two aspects which are interesting for real estate. One, it seems to be pointing towards a U-turn on the planning laws to avoid revolt in Tory ranks. He said no homes will be built on green fields. That's a promise I make. This was a big plank of government strategy. It was a plan to speed up the delivery of housing, building 300,000 homes a year by limiting the power of councils to oppose new developments. Basically, if the zone was right, the people could, if it wasn't a protected zone, developers could go ahead and build. But now, rural constituency, Tory MPs have really opposed this, fearing of a sort of glut of new developments on their land. So it looks like it's going to be a U-turn. And Robert Jenrick, the Housing Secretary that was sacked in the recent reshuffle, urged the PM after his speech not to water down the planning reform, saying they're much needed because housing is much needed in the country. He said it's a very difficult issue. You're going to find a lot of opposition. But, with an 80-strong majority, you can do it. Now is the time to do it. So you should push back against the NIMBYs, as they're called. And the other message in Boris Johnson's speech, which was very clear, was that he called on people to stop homeworking and return to the office as soon as possible. He said a productive workforce only comes from face-to-face interaction, collaboration, and water cooler gossip, as he put it. It's the first time that Johnson has mentioned this. Until now, it's been left to Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, to urge people to go back to the office. So it's quite a significant move. Footfall in central London is at the highest point now since March 2020, when the first lockdown happened, but it's still 30% down compared to pre-pandemic levels. So there seems to be, still a need for people to go back to the office and to shops. And talking of shops, Amazon has made its contribution. The big online retailer has actually opened its first general store, the first one outside the US, and it's chosen the UK, the Bluewater Shopping Centre in Kent, and it opened this week. It's called 4-Star Store. That's referring because it sells about 2,000 items of all kinds, from toys to cookware to books, that have consistently rated 4 or 5 stars, by consumers. So the sort of top products that Amazon sells on its website there, and people who do not have an account with Amazon, if there are any people out there who don't, are allowed to shop, but they don't get the special discounts that Amazon customers get. Products will change, will be a rotating change depending on what's more popular on the website. So it's a very interesting move. Amazon already opened about 6 grocery stores, high-tech grocery stores in the UK, but now this is the first general store outside the US, where it started in 2018, and it now has over 30 stores in 17 states, and they've been incredibly successful, especially in shopping centers. So that's why they've chosen Bluewater, which is a very successful shopping center in the UK. So that's an interesting sign of the confidence Amazon has in the shopping center model, which is interesting. And I was saying that Boris wants us back in the office. Well, Patrizia definitely agrees. The German group has announced that it's moving its London headquarters to Covent Garden, to a period building that is going to completely refurbish in line with its new work model concept, which is smart working, high tech, but also very healthy and pleasant for employees' well-being. Other interesting news, we've often talked about the 15-minute city concept. Not many people know that there's a man behind it. His name is Carlos Moreno. He's a professor at a university in Paris, and he invented it back in 2016. And he also worked with the mayor of Paris in 2020 to create the first 15-minute city in Paris. And he's been given the Obel Award 2021 for architecture. It's an award that is given to architecture concepts that change humanity for the better. The judges said that the 15-minute city addresses the need for us to rethink how cities can be reimagined, redesigned, and regenerated for the benefit of people and the environment. And most importantly for the jury, it does not remain confined to Paris or other cities, but it generated a worldwide movement, and many cities in the world are following in Paris's footsteps.
Yes, really interesting to see that around the future of office and also winning cities. We'll be covering both those topics in our program at Expo Real on the International Investors Lounge. So it'll be really interesting to see how that focus is viewed, both from across Europe as well as what we're seeing here in the UK. sustainability and impact also very high on the list of topics there at Expo Real. And of course, we'll also be launching our new magazine, Impact. And so if you're in Munich, feel free to pick up a copy, or you can take a look at it online. Really interesting topics, and I think that's going to be a key driver going forward. Paul, what have you been watching?
Well, the latest edition of Real Asset Insight magazine is now also available and can be read online or downloaded as a PDF file. And a printed edition of that will also be available in time for Expo Real in Munich. Appropriately, it includes a special report on Germany with both an analysis of the market and profiles of two companies, Corestate, Coros. And we have a special focus on data and communications infrastructure, which demonstrates that for infrastructure investments, there are alternatives to renewable energy projects, and they too can fulfill ESG requirements. We also spoke at length to Heinz CEO Europe, Lars Huber, who explained how the pandemic has provided new opportunities for Heinz. And we also spoke to P3 Logistics Park's new CEO, Frank Pörschke, who he's been in the job for about 6 months, and he provided an insight into the company's plans for expansion throughout Europe. Following on from what Nicole was saying about the residential sector, and last week we discussed the activity in the residential sector across Europe. And there was more interesting news on this front in the UK. Real estate specialists AHTO, which stands for Affordable Homes to Own Group, working with the bank Citi UK, announced that it's going to invest about £1 billion in UK social housing over the next 3 to 5 years. And that's part of an initiative to help people work towards full home ownership, but at a lower cost than is entailed with shared ownership schemes. The impetus is the fact that the average time taken for a UK household to save for a deposit to be able to buy a home is currently 13 years. AHTO was founded in 2020, and its head office is in London, and describes itself as a privately owned business with a social purpose, driven by outcomes which benefit local communities. AHTO plans to invest up to £150 million a project to secure developments of up to 500 homes in each case. And they're looking at cities like London, Leeds, Bristol, Manchester, Reading, Dartford, and Woking. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, how that pans out. And underlining that the housing shortage is not just a UK thing, Patron Capital formed a partnership with Freo Group and Bluestone to acquire and redevelop residential projects in Milan, and plans to invest around €250 million acquiring and repositioning assets. It started with an former light industrial scheme in the city, and will convert the disused buildings to residential, comprising about 40 units with amenities. Following the initial acquisition, the company plans to achieve scale quickly, but it will remain focused on the land, and it's already got a pipeline of sites in the city. So it's just one example, but I thought it was quite interesting.
I think there's a lot of focus on particularly residential. I know that also at Expo Real we'll be covering the Netherlands as well as student housing. And then the discussions I've already had there, there's a focus on shortages in both of those areas. So it'll be interesting to see what the view is from Expo Real there. If you're in Munich, do come and join us on the International Investors Lounge. It's Hall A1, stand number 133. Look forward to seeing you there. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Paul. Look forward to seeing you next week for our regular roundup of the real asset markets, and that'll include our kind of take on Expo Real. Thanks very much for joining us.